Picture this: 11 people trapped inside a Kentucky farmhouse with every gun they could find. War veterans and farmers who knew how to handle trouble. Outside in the dark, creatures that should not exist walked around their home. The creatures had glowing eyes. When the police came, they found something that would change everything they thought they knew about the world. Bullet holes covered the house and nearby trees. Strange, glowing stuff marked the ground. Nothing on earth should leave such traces. And in the soft mud around the house, small three-toed footprints led from the woods to the house, then they just vanished. What they found that October night became one of America's most talked about meetings with the unknown. The creatures did not fit any known group. They were not quite aliens like most people think of them. They were not earthly animals anyone could name. Local people began calling them the Hopkinsville Goblins, but the beings looked nothing like the playful sprites of old stories. The Sutton farm sat in the heart of Kentucky's coal country. Rolling hills went on and on under wide skies. This was tobacco and corn land. Families had worked the same soil for many years. Pike County had seen its share of strange tales over the years. People whispered stories of lights in the sky. They told of odd sounds echoing through the valleys, but nothing quite like what Billy Ray Taylor claimed to see. He was getting water from the family well that Sunday evening. Taylor was visiting his friend Lucky Sutton at the far-off farmhouse. The house sat about 7 miles north of Hopkinsville on the Palmyra Road. It was far back from the main road. Thick woods and rolling grassland surrounded it. This was the kind of place where a man could live quietly, away from nosy neighbors and the noise of town life. The Sutton family had called this land home for nearly 20 years. Lucky Sutton lived there with his wife, Vera. His mother, Glennie Sutton, was there too. Several other family members had come for what was supposed to be a peaceful Sunday evening. The house was a simple wooden building. It was typical of rural Kentucky homes built in the 1930s. It had a front porch and a few scattered outbuildings. Thick woodland surrounded it. This gave both privacy and an unsettling sense of being alone after dark. The area around the farm held its own mysteries. Local Cherokee legends spoke of little people who lived in caves and forests. These were not friendly fairy tale creatures. They were hard-to-predict beings. Sometimes they helped travelers. Sometimes they led them astray. Old-timers in the region told stories that went back many years. Strange lights had been seen dancing through trees on moonless nights. Hunters found animal tracks that did not match any known species. Caves in nearby limestone ridges echoed with sounds that had no clear source. The land itself seemed to hold secrets. Underground streams ran through limestone caves. No one had fully explored these caves. Some connected to huge networks. They stretched for miles beneath the Kentucky countryside. Local rock experts had found unusual mineral deposits in the area. Iron ore, quartz, and other materials created magnetic fields. Some researchers believed these might affect human thinking. They might even attract unusual events. Taylor had stepped outside around 7 in the evening to draw water from the well. He noticed something odd in the sky. A bright, silvery object moved silently across the horizon. It disappeared behind a line of trees to the southeast. The sighting lasted only a few seconds, but something about the way the object moved troubled him. It did not follow the expected path of an airplane. It did not drift randomly like a balloon. Instead, it seemed to glide with purpose, as if under smart control. The object appeared to be disc-shaped. About the size of a small car, it gave off a soft, pulsing light. The light changed from silver to white to pale blue. Most disturbing was the complete silence. Even military jets made some noise as they passed overhead. Military jets were common in Kentucky skies. This thing moved without making a sound. It glided through the air like a leaf on still water. When Taylor returned to the house, he described what he had seen. The family's reaction was mixed. Some dismissed it as a meteor or military aircraft. The Korean War had ended just 2 years earlier. The Cold War had everyone on edge about unknown aircraft. Others were not so sure. There had been other sightings in the area recently. Farmers reported strange lights hovering over their fields. Children claimed to see silver objects moving between clouds. Most adults dismissed these stories, but the reports kept coming. About an hour later, the family settled in for the evening. The dogs outside began barking wildly. This was not unusual in itself. Rural dogs bark at all kinds of nighttime visitors, from raccoons to distant thunder. But there was something different about this barking. It was frantic, terrified. The dogs sounded like they were warning about something dangerous, something coming near the house. Lucky Sutton grabbed his 20-gauge shotgun. He looked out the front door. What he saw in the moonlight made no immediate sense. A figure came toward the house from the direction of the woods. It walked upright but moved with a strange, floating walk. As it drew closer, Sutton could make out details that chilled him. The being stood roughly 3 feet tall. It had a huge head and long, thin arms. The arms reached nearly to the ground. Its skin appeared to have a metallic shine, almost like polished silver. It seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. The creature moved without making any sound. Its feet seemed to barely touch the ground. Most unsettling were the creature's eyes. They were large and round. They were positioned on the sides of its head rather than facing forward like human eyes. They glowed with a yellow light. The light pulsed slowly, like the breathing of some alien intelligence. The eyes were not just bright. They seemed to look right through a person, as if they could see thoughts and feelings. Sutton called for Taylor to join him at the door. Both men watched in stunned silence. The creature continued coming toward them. When it reached about 50 feet from the house, it stopped. It appeared to study the building. It tilted its oversized head from side to side, like a curious animal looking at something new. The two men looked at each other. Neither quite believed what they were seeing. This was 1955. UFO encounters were not yet part of popular culture. The modern idea of visitors from space was still new. Most Americans had never heard terms like close encounter or alien visitor. What they were witnessing had no ready explanation, nothing that would make sense to their rural Kentucky way of thinking. But they had to act. Something clearly did not belong here. Taylor raised his shotgun first. He took careful aim at the creature's center. The blast echoed across the farmland like thunder. Both men saw the being knocked backward by the impact. But instead of falling to the ground like any earthly creature would, it seemed to flip over. Then it righted itself with unnatural grace. For a moment, it appeared to float several inches off the ground. Then it settled back down and went back toward the woods. The sight was impossible to process. Shotgun blasts at that range should have dropped any living thing, but this creature acted as if the bullets barely affected it. It moved away calmly, without any sign of injury or panic. If anything, it seemed more curious than frightened. The sound of the shotgun blast brought the rest of the family rushing to the door. Glennie Sutton, Lucky's mother, demanded to know what was happening. Vera Sutton gathered the children close to her side. The other adults in the house armed themselves with whatever weapons they could find. Hunting rifles, a pistol, even an old Civil War musket that hung over the fireplace. As the family huddled together, they tried to make sense of what had just happened. Then they heard a scratching sound coming from the roof above their heads. It was steady and careful, like claws or fingernails dragging across the wooden shingles. The sound moved slowly from the front of the house toward the back, as if something was crawling across the roof with careful precision. The scratching was not random. It followed a pattern, moving in straight lines and making turns at regular times. Whatever was up there seemed to be mapping the roof, studying its construction and layout. The family could hear it pause at certain spots, as if looking at particular features of the building. Taylor and Lucky Sutton stepped out onto the back porch, shotguns ready. What they saw there would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Another creature, identical to the first, was perched in a large oak tree, about 15 feet from the house. It clung to a thick branch with long, thin fingers. The fingers seemed to wrap around the wood like wire, its glowing eyes fixed on the two men, with an intelligence that was clearly aware and calculating. The creature in the tree was clearly studying them. It tilted its head at different angles, as if trying to understand what it was looking at. Its eyes moved from one man to the other, then to their weapons, then back to their faces. There was something deeply unsettling about being looked at so carefully, by something so alien. This time, both men fired at the same moment. The creature pitched backward from the tree, but again, instead of falling, it seemed to float downward with controlled descent. When it touched the ground, it immediately moved toward the woods on all fours, traveling with surprising speed despite its apparent weightlessness. As it moved, it left behind that same glowing stuff, creating a faint trail of light through the darkness. As the night went on, the encounters multiplied. The creatures seemed to surround the house, coming from different directions and testing the family's defenses. They appeared at windows, peering inside with those unsettling glowing eyes. They scratched at the walls and roof, making sounds that suggested they were studying the structure, looking for weak spots or ways inside. What made the situation particularly terrifying was the creature's clear intelligence. They did not attack randomly. They did not behave like wild animals. Instead, they seemed to be conducting some kind of careful investigation of the house and its occupants. They would appear at one location, observe for several minutes, then move to another vantage point. Their behavior suggested curiosity rather than hostility, but it was a cold, alien curiosity. It offered no comfort to the terrified family. Each time the men fired their weapons, the bullets seemed to have little effect. The creatures would be knocked backward or spin through the air, but they never appeared to be injured. Instead, they would retreat briefly before returning from another angle. As if the entire encounter was some kind of elaborate game to them, the family began to realize that their weapons were essentially useless against these beings. Their main source of protection and confidence meant nothing. The children in the house began to cry, terrified by the sounds and the obvious fear of the adults. 8-year-old Bobby Sutton hid under a kitchen table, covering his ears to block out the scratching sounds. His sister Mary pressed herself against her mother's side, too frightened to speak. The youngest child, barely 3 years old, kept asking why the funny men were trying to get into the house. Glennie Sutton, the family matriarch, led prayers. Vera tried to comfort the youngest family members. The older women had lived through the Great Depression and 2 world wars. They thought they had seen everything life could throw at them, but nothing had prepared them for creatures that seemed to defy the very laws of nature. The men took turns standing watch at different windows, tracking the creatures' movements around the property. They counted at least 5 distinct beings, though there may have been more lurking in the darkness beyond their line of sight. Each creature appeared identical, the same 3-foot height, the same oversized head, the same glowing yellow eyes, the same metallic skin that seemed to shine with its own light. Around 10 o'clock, the activity seemed to get stronger. The creatures became bolder, coming closer to the house and appearing at multiple locations at the same time. At one point, Lucky Sutton counted 3 of them visible at once, one at the front window, one on the roof, one near the barn. They seemed to be working together, coordinating their movements with a level of organization that suggested advanced intelligence. The most frightening encounter came when Lucky Sutton opened the front door. He found himself face to face with one of the creatures at less than 3 feet away. The being stood perfectly still, studying him with those round, glowing eyes. Sutton later described feeling as if the creature was looking directly into his mind, reading his thoughts and emotions with an intensity that left him feeling violated and exposed. The creature's face was unlike anything in human experience. It had no visible nose, just small slits where nostrils might be. Its mouth was a thin line that never opened. Most disturbing were the eyes. They were not just large and bright. They seemed to see everything, understand everything, judge everything. Looking into them was like staring into the mind of something utterly alien, something that thought in ways no human could comprehend. The standoff lasted for what seemed like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. Neither the man nor the creature moved. Finally, Sutton raised his shotgun and fired at point-blank range. The creature was knocked backward through the air, spinning end over end, but again showed no signs of injury. It landed gracefully about 20 feet away. It retreated into the darkness, leaving Sutton shaken and confused about what he had just experienced. The psychological impact on the family was immense. These were not just strange animals or unusual weather events. These were beings that displayed intelligence, coordination, abilities that challenged everything they understood about the natural world. They moved without making sound. They seemed immune to bullets. They appeared to communicate with each other without speaking. Most disturbing of all, they showed no fear of humans or human weapons. As midnight approached, the family made a desperate decision. They could not remain trapped in the house forever. They needed help from the authorities, even if it meant risking an encounter with the creatures outside. Despite the danger, they decided to make a run for their cars, drive to the Hopkinsville police station. The escape from the house was terrifying. The creatures seemed to sense their intention, appearing at the edges of the property as the family rushed to their vehicles. The beings made no attempt to physically stop them, but their presence was menacing enough to send everyone running in pure panic. As they ran, the family could hear that same scratching sound, now coming from multiple directions, as if the creatures were communicating their movements to each other. The cars started on the first try, a small miracle that everyone later attributed to divine intervention. As they pulled away from the property, several family members reported seeing glowing eyes, watching them from the woods. The creatures seemed content to let them leave, standing motionless among the trees like silent sentinels. The drive to town passed in a blur of terror and adrenaline. The family members spoke little during the journey, each lost in their own thoughts about what they had experienced. The familiar country roads seemed strange and threatening now. Every shadow could hide another creature. Every unusual sound might be a sign that they were being followed. By the time they reached the police station, it was nearly midnight. They had to wake the duty officer to report their encounter. The initial police response was skeptical, as expected. Rural law enforcement in the 1950s dealt with their share of drunk and disorderly calls, domestic disputes, the occasional report of strange lights in the sky, but there was something about the Sutton family's behavior that suggested this was not a typical false alarm. For one thing, there were 11 witnesses, ranging in age from 3 to 50. Their stories were remarkably consistent. Despite being interviewed separately, none of them showed signs of drinking. They were all well known in the community as honest, hard-working people. Lucky Sutton was a respected farmer and Korean War veteran. His family had lived in Pike County for generations. They had never been involved in any kind of hoax or publicity stunt. The family members were clearly shaken. The children clung to their parents and flinched at sudden sounds. The adults kept looking over their shoulders, as if expecting to see glowing eyes in the corners of the police station. Their fear was genuine and deep, not the kind of nervousness that came from telling a lie or playing a prank. Chief Russell Greenwell decided to take the report seriously enough to investigate. He assembled a small team of officers and deputies. They drove out to the Sutton farm in the early morning hours. What they found there added credibility to the family's story, though it also deepened the mystery. The officers discovered numerous bullet holes in the side of the house and in nearby trees, consistent with the family's account of the gun battle. They counted over 50 shots fired from various angles around the property. The pattern of damage suggested the shooters had been firing at moving targets from multiple positions, exactly as the family had described. More intriguingly, they found strange marks in the soft earth around the property. These included what appeared to be small, three-toed footprints, unlike anything local wildlife would leave. The prints were roughly 4 inches long. They showed clear impressions of clawed toes. They appeared around the house, near the barn, and at the base of the oak tree where one creature had been seen. Most puzzling was the discovery of some kind of glowing material on the ground and on some of the nearby plants. Areas where the family claimed the creatures had walked or fallen showed a faint, glowing residue. It could not be immediately identified. The substance was odorless and seemed to fade slowly over time. None of the officers had ever seen anything like it. However, by the time the police arrived, the creatures were nowhere to be seen. The property appeared normal except for the physical evidence of the night's events. The officers conducted a thorough search of the woods and surrounding area, but found no trace of the beings that had terrorized the family. It was as if they had simply vanished into thin air. The investigation continued for several days. Military personnel from nearby Fort Campbell arrived to conduct their own examination of the site. The Air Force's official UFO investigation program also became involved, though their conclusions would ultimately disappoint many who hoped for serious investigation of the encounter. Word of the encounter spread quickly through the small community. By the next morning, reporters from local newspapers had arrived at the farm, eager to interview the witnesses and investigate the story. The case caught the attention of national media as well. Journalists from major newspapers and magazines traveled to Kentucky to cover what was being called one of the most significant UFO encounters in American history. The Air Force's official response was predictably dismissive. Their UFO investigation team classified the Sutton encounter as a case of misidentification. They suggested that the family had mistaken a pair of great horned owls for alien visitors, pointing to the creature's large eyes and the family's obvious state of panic as explanations for the more unusual details of their account. This explanation satisfied almost no one who had actually spoken with the witnesses. Great horned owls, while impressive birds, hardly matched the detailed descriptions provided by the family. The creature's metallic appearance, their apparent immunity to shotgun blasts, their coordinated behavior around the property, all seemed far beyond anything attributable to local wildlife. Moreover, the physical evidence at the scene could not be explained by the presence of owls, including the glowing residue and unusual footprints. Dr. J. Allen Hynek was the astronomer who served as scientific consultant to the Air Force UFO program. He was reportedly more intrigued by the case than the official report suggested. In private conversations with colleagues, he expressed serious doubts about the owl explanation. He noted the unusual consistency of the witness testimonies. However, the official military stance remained unchanged, reflecting the government's general reluctance to take UFO reports seriously during that era. As news of the encounter spread beyond Kentucky, it attracted attention from UFO researchers and paranormal investigators around the country. The case became one of the most well-documented early examples of what would later be classified as a close encounter of the third kind, involving direct contact with apparent extraterrestrial beings. Researchers were particularly interested in the physical evidence left behind and the large number of credible witnesses. But the Sutton family's ordeal was far from over. The publicity brought unwanted attention to their rural property. Curiosity seekers, reporters, and UFO enthusiasts descended on the farm, turning their private tragedy into a public spectacle. The family found themselves constantly pestered for interviews and details about their experience. Strangers would show up at all hours, wanting to search the property or camp out in hopes of seeing the creatures themselves. The attention became so overwhelming that the family considered moving away from their longtime home. Reporters offered money for exclusive interviews. Investigators wanted to set up equipment on their property. Thrill seekers left behind trash and damaged fences. What had been a peaceful rural retreat became a circus. The family never wanted or asked for this. The creatures themselves were never seen again after that October night, at least not by the Sutton family. However, reports of similar beings began to surface from other locations around Kentucky and neighboring states. These accounts described small, silver-skinned creatures with glowing eyes. often associated with UFO sightings or other unexplained phenomena. The consistency of these reports from unconnected sources added credibility to the idea that something genuinely unusual had occurred. The long-term impact on the family was significant and lasted for years. Several of the children developed persistent nightmares and anxiety about being outside after dark. They would wake up screaming about glowing eyes at their windows. Some refused to sleep alone or go outside without an adult present. The psychological trauma extended well into their adult lives. The adults struggled with the aftermath as well. Lucky Sutton, in particular, was deeply affected by the events. A practical man who had served his country in war and worked the land for most of his adult life. He found it difficult to reconcile what he had experienced with his traditional worldview. The encounter challenged everything he thought he knew about reality, leaving him questioning not just what had happened, but what else might be possible in a universe that suddenly seemed far stranger and more dangerous than he had ever imagined. He rarely spoke about the encounter in later years, but those who knew him said it changed him in ways that went far beyond the immediate trauma. He became more cautious, more observant of his surroundings. He would often be found staring at the sky in the evening, as if watching for something to return. Friends and family noticed that he never again dismissed unusual reports or strange stories the way he once had. The case also had broader cultural implications that extended well beyond the Sutton family. The Hopkinsville encounter occurred during the early years of the modern UFO phenomenon, when public awareness of extraterrestrial possibilities was just beginning to develop. It provided one of the first detailed accounts of alleged alien beings that did not fit the traditional little green men stereotype. That would later dominate popular culture. The creatures described by the Sutton family were genuinely alien in appearance and behavior, with features that seemed both advanced and primitive. Their large eyes and oversized heads suggested intelligence and perhaps advanced sensory capabilities. Their small stature and floating gait implied technology or abilities beyond human understanding. Yet they also displayed what appeared to be curious, almost childlike behavior that made them seem less threatening than truly menacing, at least until their immunity to human weapons became apparent. Modern researchers have proposed various theories to explain the Hopkinsville encounter, each raising its own set of questions. Some suggest it was indeed a case of extraterrestrial visitation, citing the consistent witness testimony and physical evidence as support. The creature's behavior, their apparent technology, their complete immunity to human weapons, all suggest capabilities far beyond anything known to science in 1955. Others propose that the family encountered some kind of interdimensional beings or time travelers, entities that exist partially outside our normal space-time continuum. This theory might explain their ability to appear and disappear without leaving clear trails, their immunity to physical harm, their apparent lack of concern for human weapons or defenses. Some researchers have suggested that the creatures might have been some kind of advanced artificial intelligence, perhaps robotic probes sent by a more advanced civilization to study human behavior. Their methodical examination of the house, their apparent communication with each other, their systematic approach to the encounter could support this interpretation. Skeptics continue to favor more conventional explanations, though the original owl theory has been largely abandoned even by debunkers. Some suggest the family experienced a shared hallucination, possibly triggered by stress, environmental factors, or even contamination from natural gas seepage in the area. Others propose that the entire encounter was an elaborate hoax designed to gain attention or money. Though the family's subsequent behavior and their reluctance to profit from the story make this explanation problematic, recent investigations have uncovered additional details that add complexity to the case. Property records show that the Sutton farm was located near several limestone caves and underground waterways, leading some researchers to speculate about subterranean origins for the creatures. The area also has a history of unusual mineral deposits and electromagnetic anomalies. That might have contributed to the strange phenomena or attracted unusual visitors. Geological surveys of the region have revealed a complex network of caves and underground streams that extends for miles beneath the Kentucky countryside. Some of these caverns have never been fully explored. Local legends speak of strange sounds and lights emanating from their depths. Could the creatures have emerged from this underground world? The theory is intriguing but raises more questions than it answers. Local folklore from the region includes stories of small, mischievous beings that predate the Sutton encounter by many decades. Cherokee and other Native American tribes that once inhabited the area had legends of little people who lived in the forests and caves. These traditional accounts describe creatures that were neither completely friendly nor entirely hostile, but rather unpredictable entities that occasionally interacted with humans in puzzling ways. These older stories share some remarkable similarities with the Sutton encounter. The little people were said to have large eyes that could see in the dark. They were described as being difficult to harm with conventional weapons. They were known to approach human dwellings and observe the occupants with curiosity. Most intriguingly, they were said to leave behind glowing traces of their presence and to move without making normal footstep sounds. The psychological dimension of the case remains equally fascinating. The Sutton family's response to their encounter reflected the broader cultural anxieties of the 1950s, when Cold War tensions and rapid technological advancement created a sense that the familiar world was changing in fundamental ways. The creatures they described embodied many of the fears and fascinations of the atomic age, beings that appeared to possess advanced technology, yet whose motives remained completely unclear and possibly incomprehensible. The family's terror was not just about the immediate physical threat posed by the creatures. It was also about the realization that their understanding of the world was fundamentally incomplete. If beings like this could exist, what else might be out there? What other assumptions about reality might be wrong? These existential questions haunted the family long after the physical encounter ended. Decades later, the Hopkinsville Goblins case continues to generate interest and debate among researchers, skeptics, and believers alike. The town of Hopkinsville has embraced its connection to the encounter, hosting an annual festival that celebrates its place in UFO history. The event draws visitors from around the world, all eager to learn more about one of the most credible and well-documented close encounter cases in American history. The original Sutton property has changed hands several times since 1955, but visitors still report strange experiences and unusual phenomena in the area. Some claim to have seen unusual lights moving through the woods. Others report finding strange markings or traces of phosphorescent material. While none of these modern reports match the intensity of the original encounter, they suggest that whatever drew the creatures to that location in 1955 might still be present. Whether the creatures were visitors from another world, travelers from another dimension, beings from an underground realm, or something else entirely, their brief appearance in rural Kentucky left an indelible mark on those who witnessed them and on the broader culture's understanding of what might be possible. The case stands as a reminder that our knowledge of the universe remains fundamentally incomplete, and that even in the most familiar places, mysteries can emerge that challenge everything we think we know about the nature of reality. The Sutton family's encounter forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about the limits of human knowledge and the possibility that we share our world with intelligences we do not understand. Whether we choose to believe their story or dismiss it as misidentification or hallucination, the case remains a powerful reminder that the universe may be far stranger and more crowded than we imagine. What happened at the Sutton farm that October night remains unexplained, despite decades of investigation and analysis. The creatures that terrorized the family for those few hours appeared and vanished without leaving a clear trail of evidence, existing now only in the memories of those who were there. and in the questions that continue to echo through the hollows of Kentucky, waiting for answers that may never come. If you have ever experienced something that defied explanation, share your story in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this exploration of one of America's most puzzling encounters, consider subscribing for more tales from the edges of the known world.